enough 11 to 12 Celsius. But into Thursday, we're going to see a cloudier start to the day. Still some pockets of fog about, not as much as previous mornings, however. And it's going to be a mainly cloudy day, I think, with some light showers affecting northwestern parts. Into Friday, a change is on the way, but it takes a good 24 to 36 hours to make its way across the country. That change to much colder weather through the weekend.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. There are long queues on the M6 heading north through Lancashire. Just watching the cameras on the Preston bypass. 2 lanes on that 4-lane stretch coned off at junction 31 east of Preston, just off the A59 following an accident. It's queuing back to the M65. In Lincolnshire, west of Horncastle, the A158, the Lincoln Road at Bournemouth, is blocked off by an accident. On the Essex stretch of the M25, the 2 outside lanes are closed clockwise. Emergency repair works are underway just after the M11. Queues back through the Belcommon Tunnel, watching the cameras. On the M4 in Berkshire, 1 lane's closed westbound from junction 7 to 8, the Slough Maidenhead stretch of the motorway following an accident. And trains are suspended on the East Coast Main Line heading south of Edinburgh Waverley to Berwick upon Tweed, just on the Scottish-English border, following a 40 train. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
There's only 2 weeks remaining to win Christmas on Us this year. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. 1 entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2 or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very good evening to you. It's 7 p.m. and welcome to the Farage Show on GB News with me. I'm Martin Dorby, standing in for the big man Nigel Farage tonight. On tonight's show, Justin Welby announces his resignation as the Archbishop of Canterbury after mounting pressure from both within the church and the country at large over revelations that he failed to disclose information about child abuse in the Church of England. Is it too little, too late, or is the Church of England about to get the great reset that it so desperately needs? And the first draft of the controversial assisted dying bill was published yesterday as supporters reaffirmed the legitimacy and robustness of safeguards within it. But would they be enough not only to protect the most vulnerable but also to win over critics and become law? Well, Richard Tice, the Deputy Leader of the Reform UK Party, who is voting in favour of this controversial motion, he joins me in just a moment. And MPs are voting this evening on whether to remove hereditary peers from the House of Lords, with the 92 who do remain being the only ones to be elected to the upper chamber. Is this a necessary progression of democracy or a gratuitous socialist act of class warfare? And at COP29, the pointless COP29, the Azerbaijani president blasted Western nations for hypocrisy, buying his gas while preaching climate action, and even called fossil fuels a gift from the gods. The only Keir Starmer representing major Western leaders. Is this a wake-up call on the UK's net zero agenda? Now, that's an action-packed menu, but before all of that, here's your headlines, and it's Sophia Reaper.
Thank you, Martin. It's just after 7 o'clock. Let's take a look at your latest GB News headlines. In the last couple of hours, a spokesperson for Avon and Somerset Police has given a statement following the death of a 17-year-old girl on the M5 motorway last night. Let's take a listen to what they had to say.
This is a hugely distressing incident, and one that will no doubt cause great shock amongst the public. Our thoughts and our sympathies are first and foremost with the girl's family. A specially trained officer has been assigned to keep providing them with updates and support, not only today but in the weeks ahead too. Due to the seriousness of the incident, a mandatory referral was made to the Independent Police Office for Police Conduct in the early hours of the morning. The IOPC has notified us they will investigate the incident independently.
A spokesperson for the Prime Minister has said that Sir Keir respects the decision of the Archbishop of Canterbury to resign. Justin Welby stepped down earlier this afternoon following a damning report into a prolific child abuser associated with the Church of England. The reports concluded that Welby had failed to act after learning about the abuse by John Smythe QC in 2013. Terminally ill adults who are expected to die within 6 months would be able to request assistance to end their own life under the proposed end-of-life bill. But someone with a disability or mental health issues would not be eligible. The controversial bill has raised some concerns that people could feel pressured into ending their lives prematurely. MPs will have their first vote on the proposal on the 29th of November. A once-a-day pill that could help tens of thousands of people give up cigarettes and prevent thousands of smoking-related deaths each year will be rolled out on the NHS. The pill works by tackling nicotine cravings and also helps with withdrawal symptoms such as irritability and trouble sleeping. Official estimates say it could help more than 85,000 people give up on smoking over the next 5 years, as well as prevent up to 9,500 smoking-related deaths. Queen Camilla will return to public duties today after her chest infection. The Queen will attend the Booker Prize reception at Clarence House later today, but will meet guests for a shorter period than initially planned. She was forced to withdraw from her duties last week, as well as missing out on the weekend's Remembrance Day commemoration events. And Gary Lineker will step down as the host of Match of the Day at the end of the current season. The 63-year-old former England striker has presented Match of the Day since 1999. But now Mark Chapman, Gabby Logan and Alex Scott are the current frontrunners to replace the former England star. For now, those are your latest GB News headlines. I'm Sophie Reaper. More from me in the next hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Now, Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, has announced his resignation today amid increasing pressure from both within the Church of England and the public at large. The announcement follows revelations that he failed to disclose critical information about instances of child abuse within the Church, a scandal that has sparked widespread outrage. As the highest-ranking figure in the Church of England, Welby's decision to go appears to only have come after immense pressure from within his own clergy rather than an admittance of failure or even of conscience. Well, just on Friday, GB News approached Lambeth Palace for comment, to which they responded. The Archbishop reiterates his horror at the scale of John Smythe's abuse as reflected in his public apology, and he said he would not be stepping down on this issue and rejects the claim that he was aware of the allegations or had any suspicion of the allegations before he was told in 2013. Now, was Welby's position completely untenable? Was he right to go? And what must the Church of England do to fix it? So tonight I'm asking you the big question. Please get in touch. Was the Archbishop of Canterbury right to resign over this abuse scandal? Let me know by tweeting hashtag Farage on GB News or email us at farage@gbnews.uk. Well, to discuss this further, I'm now joined by the Church of England vicar, the Reverend Dan Beasley. Reverend Beasley, welcome to the show. This is an enormous scandal. The Archbishop has stepped down. There's a great feeling that he was shoved rather than going of his own accord. Do you think it was the right thing for him to do to have gone?
Yeah, I think his position, as everybody had said, Bishop of Newcastle came out, which again is unprecedented. It was untenable after he didn't follow up on the disclosure that was made in 2013. I don't think there was anything else he could actually do. He is the head of the Church of England. Well, Jesus, let's put it up first of all, Jesus is the head of the church, but he is leading the Church of England. He is the leader of safeguarding. It has also improved under his tenure. But to improve safeguarding while having this hanging over himself as well is it just made his position untenable.
And of course, Dan, the huge question is this time frame of when he knew and what he knew. We don't know the details. 1981 is the word when he was first tipped off something may be going wrong. We definitely know for sure that 2013 he knew. And of course, then in the intermittent 5 years, John Smythe passed away in Cape Town. In that precious 5 years, something perhaps could have been done. Even earlier, something could have been done to perhaps prevent the abuse of over 130 boys. This is a scandal that runs deep. This is a scandal that will cast a huge and long and dark shadow over the Church of England. What can the Church do to salvage its shattered reputation?
Well, obviously, there needs to be a change of culture because safeguarding has improved, and it has improved since the 70s and 80s when Smythe and many other abusers have been in the Church of England. And let's not forget, there's other denominations out there. These people will work their way in, and we have to make safeguarding, so strong in our churches to make sure that they don't come in. And that's what we're doing today on the parish level. The safeguarding in parish churches is really strong. But let's talk in reality. There was a Ruston report back in 1982 that spoke about Smythe, and this should have been stopped then. It should never have got to 2013, and yet it did. And there were many instances across that time span, 40 years of abuse he was able to do, both in England, in Zimbabwe and South Africa. And every time he got caught, he moved himself on. And if the safeguarding was robust enough and referred to the police at the right time. So, as safeguarding has improved through the church over the years, the question is, why hasn't people looked back? So the Archbishop said he made a mistake or he didn't understand or whatever it was in 2013. As safeguarding has got better, why did it take Channel 4 in 2017 to bring the Smythe abuses to light? As we look back, we have to look back on those things as well. So a culture change really has to come in, and we have to look at ourselves quite seriously and why we have. It's victims at the end of the day. They have to be at the forefront. They've been let down time and time again, and this cannot happen anymore.
Dan, can I ask you a question about an attitude which many feel exemplifies now the Church of England? And it's a phrase that involves moats and planks. Holier than thou. Holier than thou about climate change, about racism, about immigration, about vaccines, about Brexit, about LGBTQ. You get my point. And yet, seemingly not having a holier than thou attitude about the most important people in the church, and that is your own flock. Where have you gone so wrong?
Again, I'm going to come back, and it's been out there all afternoon since the Archbishop's resignation. There seems a divide, what we are doing on the ground. And yes, there is that ideology in the Church of England, but we got to get back to what is the Church is called for, and that's to preach the gospel and to be there for those who are most in need, and to be in that public square speaking out for those most vulnerable. So, for example, the pensioners who lost their heating allowance, why we need to be speaking about that unjustness. That's the right things that we should be speaking about. But we're not holier than thou. We're all fallen. That's our Christian belief. We're all fallen. But we've got to rebuild, in that sense, the church. We've got to get rid of this divide. But again, the church is divided. We're divided over same-sex blessings. That's going to come up next year, again, in the General Synod. The job for the next Archbishop of Canterbury is huge, but we have to get back to what we are known for. So many people keep telling me, you're Christians, aren't you? Why aren't you talking about the Christian values which the country was built upon? Why have you gone away from that? So maybe this is just a great opportunity for us to once again get into that public square, speak about the hope of Jesus Christ, and speak against some of the values that are just come in, not only to society, but into the church as well.
Okay, we have to leave it there. Thanks for your expertise. And joining us tonight, that's the Reverend Dan Beasley, Church of England Vicar. Thank you very much. Now let's get to my superstar panel tonight. I'm joined by the former Conservative MP, Ranil Jayawardena, and of course the former Labour advisor, Matthew Lars. Gentlemen, welcome to the studio. Ranil, I'm going to start with you. What's your take on today's decision? He had to go, it was inevitable, but where does it leave the church?
Yeah, I mean, I think he clearly did have to go, and it is at least good that he did take that decision now, rather than leaving it lingering any longer, because it was bringing the Church of England as a whole into disrepute. I do find, I'm a PCC member, a parochial church council member myself, and I do find it rather at odds that we as PCC members, even if we have no ministry of our own, no care directly of any individual in our parish, we have to complete huge amounts of safeguarding paperwork and courses and so on. And yet it seems that there are all sorts of other things happening up the line at the centre of the church. And, the church has been hugely centralised under Archbishop Justin Welby. And I think it is now, as the Reverend Beasley said, an opportunity for the church to perhaps reset and to reflect on what it should be for. It's perfectly right that the church should express its views on certain issues that it feels strongly about, but I'm afraid it has become far too political, and that has meant that many parishioners feel very uncomfortable in what the Archbishop, the titular head, bar the King, of course, of the Church of England, is saying on their behalf.
Matthew Larser, get your take on what you make of Justin Welby's resignation, but also this notion that in many ways the church doesn't seem to represent any of the values of its flock anymore. It's obsessed with identity politics, with issues. Let's face it, most people who go to church are pensioners. They're elderly, white, British pensioners. That's the demographic. Well, actually, on the whole.
Yeah, outside
and
of
all
the
this
cities.
language about climate change, Greta Thunberg with a robe on, is completely out of touch.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that clearly he had to go. I think the issue is that the church, it's not so much that the church is woke, that the church ties itself in knots. I mean, one of the issues, in all the reports, what's going to be in the inbox of the new incoming Archbishop, one of the issues, of course, is that the church still ties itself in a knot about things like LGBT rights. And, Justin Welby was very, I mean, he got a bit better in his tenure, but he was very, very, trying to hold a line, not have any blessing of same-sex, of committed same-sex relationships in church.
How many people go to church care about this kind of stuff?
Well, some people do, but what he was doing is whilst he was tearing himself into knots about, the sort of fourth line of an agreement of a declaration about LGBT rights, what he wasn't doing was asking enough questions about this guy. And what I think is particularly scandalous tonight is, let me make sure I get the Bishop of Lincoln's name right, which is Bishop Stephen Conway, who is the Bishop of Lincoln, who is even more heavily criticised in the report that criticised Justin Welby, where the report said that he was the person in a position, this is a quote, to stop John Smythe bringing him to justice, and he fundamentally failed. Tonight, he's not only still the Bishop of Lincoln, and this relates to the discussion we're going to have in a moment, he also sits in the House of Lords. So I think we need further resignations from the church before we can see that this is in any way near. And all victim and survivors groups are calling for the Bishop of Lincoln's resignation tonight.
But the leadership in the church under Welby, has focused on things like the two-child benefit cap, which is very popular with the country, and yet he's decided to stand against it. He's stood up on issues like tax avoidance, when actually he should have been dealing with people's lives being damaged, and whether it was refugees, employment rights. These are not necessarily things that parishioners across the country want the Archbishop to do. So he's had his eye off the ball.
Yeah, I think the problem is that, as you said in the interview with the Reverend Beasley, is that it's about the holier than thou attitude sometimes. I think it's perfectly OK to ask moral questions on these big issues, but to say that you have all the answers on things that are, clearly somewhere away from Scripture, are very much about interpretation, I think is difficult.
Gentlemen, we have to leave it there. We have to call time and read out a statement from Justin Welby, who has said this. It is very clear that I must take personal and institutional responsibility for the long and re-traumatising period between 2013 and 2024. I hope this decision today makes clear how seriously the Church of England understands the need for change and our profound commitments to creating a safer church. As I step down, I do so in sorrow with all victims and survivors of abuse. I believe that stepping aside is in the best interests of the Church of England, which I dearly love and which I have been honoured to serve. I pray that this decision points us back towards the love that Jesus Christ has for every one of us. Well, coming up next, the first draft of the controversial assisted dying bill was published yesterday. Our supporters reaffirmed the legitimacy and the robustness of safeguards within it. Would they be enough not only to protect the most vulnerable, but also to win over critics and become British law? Well, Richard Tice, who is voting in favour of this controversial motion, he joins me next.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
This is about pulchronomics, which is the often hidden, often controversial economics of beauty. And there's this guy, he's called, here it says Anil Hammermesh, but I think they've missed out the D, so I'm guessing he's Daniel rather than Anil, which he might be, though. He might be or he might be anal for an Anil Hammermesh, maybe. That's his unfortunate name. But basically, he's looked into how ugliness affects people, and it turns out he's discovered that ugly people are less attractive. And that affects them for the rest of their life. Now, where this does get interesting, and it is worrying because, of course, it's going to lead to the ugly rights movement, ugly pride march down some dirty back street. And but I remember hearing about this at the time. People born in the UK between March 3rd and March 9th, 1958 were part of this massive survey that was done, which was finding about what would happen to them later in life, and it went through a number of different factors. But I didn't know this. The teachers were also asked to rate their pupils on attractiveness.
Yeah, it's a bit pedo-y.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know whether that would wash now, but it was bone structure and where they're symmetrical, that kind of thing.
You should probably really have a committee of at least half a dozen teachers. Take a sort of standardised view across the... You might get a different point of view from the biology teacher, from the Latin master.
You suggest this to a school, and then we can see if we get it going.
It's interesting, though. I don't know whether you're aware of this, but generally speaking, it is understood within sort of psychological, psychometrics and so on, that IQ is the thing that most closely maps your outcomes, generally speaking. But the idea of beauty is the one that isn't discussed. And there is genuinely a theory that this is actually the great determinant of your life chances.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubney, covering for Nigel Farage on GB News. Now, before the break, we asked you, was the Archbishop of Canterbury correct to resign over today's abuse scandal? And Irvin says this: if my memory serves me correctly, Welby described the Rwanda plan as ungodly. I wonder what he would have called his actions concerning this abuse scandal. The man is a disgrace to all civilised, decent people, let alone the Church of England. And Alex adds this: the Archbishop had to go. We now need a Christian religious leader, not someone who is full of wokery and politics. Alex, so many people have been echoing that sentiment. Get back to your flock and stop being obsessed with identity politics. Now, the first draft of the highly contentious assisted dying bill was published yesterday, with supporters emphasising the bill's comprehensive safeguards, asserting that they are both legitimate and robust and designed to protect vulnerable individuals who critics say are at risk of the law being abused and unjustifiably killed. Let's take a listen to what the bill's biggest cheerleader, Labour's Kim Leadbeater, had to say earlier.
If you're saying it's fine that we've got people taking their own lives, being forced to go to other countries, having horrible deaths despite good palliative care, then you vote against the bill, you abstain. But that's not right. And I would say to anybody, speak to those people, speak to those organisations who do this work, and you will see very clearly that the law as it stands is not fit for purpose.
It's Labour's Kim Leadbeater. But questions do remain. Are these safeguards stringent enough to dispel the fears of critics? And the measure has divided opinions across the political spectrum, including figures like Reform UK's Deputy Leader Richard Tice, who is in favour of this controversial motion. I'm delighted to say that Richard now joins me in the studio. Richard Tice, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Probably one of the few times you'll ever agree with Kim Leadbeater on anything.
And I've had good discussions with Kim. I made it clear very early on that I think it is the right thing to do. Already just in your intro, actually, it's not assisted dying. It's actually the terminally ill adults bill. And it is for those who are terminally ill, who are expected to live no longer than 6 months. The safeguards are very, very strong. It's got to be signed off by 2 independent doctors, by a judge in a high court, and then you have to be compos mentis. So it's not someone else administering it. It is you administering it, and it's based on the safeguards of this bill are based on what works very successfully for some 25 years in the state of Oregon in the United States, where they've used very similar safeguards. And if you actually look, they haven't had abuse. They haven't had the pressure to extend it. But it's a very personal thing. It's not a party political thing. It's deeply personal. And for those who've seen loved ones die in excruciating agony, knowing what faces them, those last couple of days, weeks can be truly, truly awful. I've had that experience. It seared me, and it's why I have the position. I completely respect those who have a different view. But I think the great thing is we're talking about it. We're debating it. It seems to come up once every 10 years. This bill is the strongest safeguards I think that's ever been discussed, possibly the strongest in the world. And there's a lot of misinformation out there, Martin. People saying it's only going to be discussed, it's being rushed through in a couple of weeks. No, it's not. What's going to be debated on Friday the 29th of November is the second reading. There'll be 6 months of debate, committees, discussion, votes in the House of Lords, back to the House of Commons. So there's lots of time to discuss this. And fundamentally, it's actually about freedom of choice for someone who knows what's ahead of them in those situations is a really horrific, painful, awful way to depart. And I think people should be given and allowed to have that freedom of choice. It shouldn't just be for the wealthy who can afford to go to Switzerland.
Now, a lot of people have grave concerns about this. They have worries about what happened in Canada, for example, when this was brought in, and that was robust then. But, of course, it was liberalised and it became easier for people to die and the system was abused. One person who does have concerns, actually, is Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. And here's what he said to GB News on Friday.
There are people that die in the most appalling circumstances. As an MEP, I was lobbied on that issue more than any other during my 20 years there. So I completely understand why people want this to be law, but I need a lot of convincing that it won't be abused.
And that's the joy, that this is not, it's not a party issue, it's a very personal issue. And I think it is good that we debate it, we discuss it. I hope lots of MPs come on that Friday and listen to the debate. And it's not being rushed through. But when I look at my postbag from constituents, it is meaningfully in favour so far. And we'll see, no doubt. There's lots of lobbying on both sides, as you would expect.
Now, Mr Farage there was referring to appalling abuses, and again, bring it back to Canada. GB News went to Canada, to Toronto, spoke with people involved in the assisted dying legislation there, and it undeniably had been abused. Disabled people who were granted the right.
But did GB News go to Oregon?
Well, in Canada, let's discuss this. They were granted the right to die early for being disabled. Soldiers with PTSD who didn't feel like they could carry on.
And that's obviously daft.
But they weren't being offered therapy. They weren't being offered help. They were being offered a quick, fast track to death.
The Canada example is a nonsense. We know it's appalling. This is completely different. And frankly, GB News should go to Oregon, see how it's worked for 25 years, very successfully in Oregon, in order to have a balanced view. We know what's not working. We've got the most respected legal system in the world. Frankly, if we can't design some appropriate safeguards and guardrails for this work, then frankly, shame on us. And shame on us for not having the courage to try and to look at it. And that's how you make progress in life, is you try things, and if it's not quite working, if it needs a bit of tweaking, a bit of reviewing, and a review is built into this this bill, and all of this can be debated over months. But if you're never prepared to try and make progress, and for those who say we need to focus on palliative care, of course, but they're not mutually exclusive. Palliative care, hospices, but there's some pain relief that just doesn't touch the sides.
What do you say to people who say politicians have no right to play God?
But they're not. They're actually giving the right to the individual. And, what about the freedom of choice for someone who knows they're going to suffer a brutal, hideous, violent, unbelievably painful death? Surely they have the right to decide, I don't want those last couple of days, actually. And I think that should be their right. And it's for politicians, I think, to say, we understand, we'll give you that right with all the appropriate safeguards. And if people are anxious about it, fine, talk about the safeguards, talk about the review mechanism, but don't force people to suffer a horrific, awful, painful death. Okay. And that's my view.
Richard Tice, you contacted me earlier. I know you're keen to speak on the Justin Welby situation. In fact, you have some insight into some of those.
I do, because obviously he's now resigned and he's put out a statement there. But he has. I mean, I think he's been an awful Archbishop of Canterbury. I think the worst in living memory. So for multiple reasons. But, this saga and these allegations are truly awful. And it transpires that I was actually one of those who was at this summer camp in the late 1970s. Mum was always quite keen to farm me off in summer holidays. And so I was on the list, the attendance records, it transpires. And I was there definitely one summer, possibly two. It's 50 years ago, so the memory's a little bit. But I consider myself, very lucky. I didn't have any bad experiences, inappropriate experiences, but I was at that camp with John Smith running it. And so, it's quite a reflective moment when suddenly you get a phone call to say, I gather you were there. What was it like? Were you impacted? And, I sort of consider myself very lucky. No, I wasn't. These places were... they were extension of boarding schools, and things were very different in those days. Fortunately, many of us have been governors. We know that safeguarding is the number one issue, but it's quite a moment to sort of think, crikey, I was there. But Justin Welby quite rightly has resigned. There's serious questions as to whether or not he can remain in the House of Lords. Frankly, I don't see that he can. I think his position's untenable. I suspect people have left for less. And he's also got other questions to answer. There are allegations, but obviously he's got questions to answer. What did he know when in the 1980s, if anything?
OK, lots of questions to be asked, and we can't answer those tonight. Richard Tice, thank you very much for joining us tonight on GB News. Superb opinions, thank you as ever. Now, coming up next, MPs are voting this evening on, as Mr Syce just said, whether to remove hereditary peers from the House of Lords, with the 92 who remain being the only ones to be elected to the upper chamber. Is this a necessary progression of democracy, or is it a gratuitous socialist act of class warfare? That's next.
Hello again and welcome along to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. Staying fine for most of us during the next 24 hours, but it will be chilly overnight, and again we'll see some frost and fog form under this area of high pressure. The high this time contains clearer skies compared with last week's high pressure, which was predominantly gloomy. That means, of course, temperatures will fall away overnight quite quickly. So frost and fog pockets forming, especially across parts of Wales, the Midlands, Northern England, Northern Ireland. At either side of that, we're going to see cloud in the south and the far northwest, tending to keep things mild, and it will be a drizzly start to the day for northwest Scotland, and there'll be showers around first thing for parts of Kent as well, 1 or 2 showers running along the south coast. With the cloud in the south, a milder start to the day, but for Wales, the Midlands, Northern England, parts of Northern Ireland, some dense pockets of fog about, likewise for central and southern Scotland. But further north into northwest Scotland, well, it's going to be a milder start to the day because of the cloud and those outbreaks of mostly light rain and drizzle. The light rain pushing into parts of Northern Ireland through the morning as well, and this area of cloud in the far northwest will tend to sink southwards slowly, and it will also turn cloudier through parts of Northern England, the Midlands and North Wales. Brighter skies to the south and southeast, a drier day to come for southeast England, and feeling pleasant enough, 11 to 12 Celsius. But into Thursday, we're going to see a cloudier start to the day. Still some pockets of fog about, not as much as previous mornings, however. And it's going to be a mainly cloudy day, I think, with some light showers affecting northwestern parts. Into Friday, a change is on the way, but it takes a good 24 to 36 hours to make its way across the country. That change to much colder weather through the weekend.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubney, covering for Nigel Farage now. MPs, as we speak, are voting on the removal of hereditary peers from the House of Lords, the remaining 92, whom being the only elected members of the upper house, a system established as a compromise during New Labour's attempt to abolish the House of Lords in 1999. Now, for some, this vote represents a vital step forward in modernising the UK's political system. But to others, however, this move is an act of class-based hostility, unfairly targeting a long-standing British institution rooted in tradition. Now, does this vote signify a necessary evolution of democracy, or is it merely a gratuitous move fuelled by socialist sentiments, seeking to dismantle the social and historical legacy that the hereditary peers represent? Well, to ask a hereditary peer himself, I'm joined now by Lord Strathclyde, along with my panel, the former Conservative MP Ranil Jayawardena and the former Labour advisor Matthew Larser. Now, of course, I have to start with you, Lord Strathclyde. I think I know the answer, but would you like to be abolished?
Well, I'd rather not at the moment. I mean, if I've got to be abolished, I want to make sure that we replace the House of Lords with something really worthwhile and not just a bunch of policemen at the beck and call of the Prime Minister so that he can control the second chamber as effectively as he controls the first. So what I'm in favour of is a joint committee of both houses, look very carefully at all the alternatives, direct, indirect elections, and then come forward with a proper plan and put it through perhaps next Parliament or the Parliament after that, when everybody can agree. After all, we've had the current system for 25 years and it's worked perfectly well.
Now, you must have seen the tiger in the reeds with the Labour Party coming into power. They haven't been exactly quiet on the issue. They want rid of the whole shebang. They want rid of the House of Lords in its totality. They say, let's modernise it. We know what that means. They mean to give it the boot. Do you think that's the direction of travel?
Well, if they want to abolish the whole place, nothing could be easier than this government with their monstrous majority. They can do pretty much whatever they want. And if that's really what they want to do, then get on with it and do it. But I don't think that is what they want. They simply want control. They want to make sure there is no opposition, there is no argument, there is no discussion, and they want to be able to make sure that they decide who goes in and who goes out. So the 85-odd hereditary peers, most of them are Conservatives or crossbenchers. That is too tempting for the Labour Party, and they are saying tonight, let's get rid of them.
OK, thank you very much, Lord Strathclyde. Let's bring my panel in now. Matthew, I'll start with you. I sense you might be, your fangs might be drooling to get rid of the whole shebang.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so look, I mean, I agree with Lord Strathclyde that we need wider reform, and the Labour Party has pledged itself to that, although over a longer time frame. But in the meantime, you know, good service, though individuals may have given, the principle of somebody serving in a legislature on the basis of their birth is absolutely outrageous. We've also got the issue of the bishops serving as peers, which we touched on in the previous debate, which actually Gavin Williamson, I don't agree with him on much, but the Tory former Secretaries of State, Defence, Education and the Chief Whip, he's now called for the bishops to go as well. So I think that if you are going to complete the job, that may well be worth looking at, which actually the government hasn't done, but I would be in favour of doing, because but we do need to move towards an elected second chamber. We can't carry on with the current situation. This is a stopgap.
Rano, you're grinding your teeth. Over to you.
Well, it is shocking. It is a rigging of the system by this government. You know, fundamentally, the only people who are elected in the House of Lords are the hereditary peers.
By themselves?
In fact, they have the biggest mandate to be there. And, you know, one of the things that I think people should be aware of in terms of the House of Lords, it's all very well Labour and Matthew tonight saying that actually what we need is an elected second chamber. You know, first of all, the House of Commons is the elected chamber, and to ensure primacy and clarity in our constitution, having one chamber that has that mandate is really important. And the second thing is you want to make sure there are true independent voices who are able to speak their mind, beholden to no one. And whether that's the hereditary peers or experts in their field, the House of Lords has a really important function. So, you know, as Lord Strathclyde said, 25 years ago, there are many people not in favour of the reform then. It was done. There have been no problems since, so why change it?
OK, final word to Lord Strathclyde. What do you say to people who think the House of Lords just gets in the way of everything? It tried its best to stop Brexit, it stopped the Rwanda plan, it stops everything they don't like, it's just a vote-blocking device.
Well, I certainly didn't agree with those two examples that you brought forward, and they're good examples, but they didn't block it. They held it up. It was a hurdle, and that's what the House of Lords does, and in fact does rather well, even though when we were in government I very much objected to it. That they make it more difficult for governments to get their way because they argue it through, they consult with it. So today we've seen the House of Commons pass the end of the Hereditary Peers Bill within a few hours. The House of Lords will take proper time, many weeks of deliberation, as we will on every bill that comes forward from the House of Commons. We are doing the scrutiny and the revision the House of Commons used to do a long time ago, but has given up really over the last 25 years. We will continue to do that job.
Do you know how the vote went? Have you been abolished?
As far as the House of Commons is concerned, yes. But remember, there's a long way to go before it gets through the whole of Parliament up to Royal Assent.
Superb. Lord Strathclyde, Anna Mano and Matthew, thank you very, very much. Great fun. Now, moving on, the Friends of the British Overseas Territories is hosting a Chagos Islands call to action rally in Hackney as we speak, uniting Chagossians and supporters against the island's handover to Mauritius. Speakers include Arlene Foster and comes just a day after the Chagos Islands was snubbed from Remembrance wreath laying. Well, join me now from that rally, the GBNews reporter Adam Cherry. Adam, I spoke to you a while ago. A very, very spirited event. Tell us more.
That's right, Martin. Yeah, we've retreated outside because it's so loud in there, you won't be able to hear us otherwise. The key phrase here is self-determination. Chagossians here are furious. They feel they've been silenced by this government and by this decision. And every speaker I've heard so far, as you say, the event is still going on, has said the same thing. I'm joined now by one of the speakers, which is Wendy Morton. Wendy, thank you for joining us. Now, you said in your speech that it's all about self-determination and that this government has made a serious mistake here. Tell us more. Why is this such a big deal?
It's a huge deal because, this is about UK sovereignty and the people today, this evening, we've been hearing them really reiterate their anger, their frustration, and it just feels that like they've been ignored. Where is the consultation? And if we really truly believe in the right of self-determination, which I do, why haven't they been listened to? So I came along this evening because I wanted to listen to the community. I've stood up in Parliament for them at questions. And, this Labour government, it felt like they snuck this decision out. When Parliament was in recess, there's very little time, well, no time actually to really ask questions, no opportunity to, hold them to account. And, there are people here this evening from Crawley, from Manchester, from around the country, and this is the strength of feeling. But if this is what this government is going to do to the British Indian Ocean territories, what does that mean for other OTs, for other overseas territories?
Now, Martin, thank you for that, Wendy. Martin, you wanted to ask a question as well. So what was it you wanted to say whilst we're here?
Yeah, I want to ask you, so you're in Hackney, of course, that is Diane Abbott's seat. Diane Abbott always normally holding the standard, champing at the bit to stick up for ethnic minorities. Is Diane Abbott there tonight? I think I know the answer.
So Martin Daubney asks us if Diane Abbott is here tonight, and this is her constituency. I haven't seen her. Have you seen Diane Abbott this evening?
I've seen no members of the Labour government here this evening at all.
That's right. Thank you very much, Wendy Morton. Who's the new Shadow Foreign Minister for the Conservative Party. As I say, a very big event here. It's still ongoing. You might still be able to hear it. Everyone's saying the same thing. Self-determination. Our voices have been silenced, Martin.
Thanks to Adam Cherry, and to my knowledge, GB News is the only TV channel there giving those Chagossians the voice they deserve. Adam Cherry, sterling work as ever, and give all of our regards to the people there with the very best of luck with their plights. Now, coming up next, at COP29, the Azerbaijani president blasted Western nations for hypocrisy, for buying his gas while preaching climate action, and even called fossil fuels a gift of God. I don't think it went too well for the climate brigade. With only Keir Starmer representing major Western leaders, is this the final wake-up call that these conferences are utterly pointless? That's coming next.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
On the 8th of October at Battersea Arts Centre, a new orchestra launched its inaugural season. The orchestra, which is named Chromatica, is formed of some of the best young musicians in Britain. They're due to perform in traditional venues and in community spaces. The aim is to bring their youth and dynamism to a wide repertoire of music. Predominantly, they'll work with emerging conductors who will have the chance to shape the orchestra and its repertoire. To share her experiences of bringing the ensemble together, I'm joined by the violinist and Chromatica orchestra lead, Maren Bosma. To what extent is this novel? To what extent is this new ground?
Well, new ground, it is new ground in a sense that this is a completely new orchestra. Obviously, in the current sort of cultural climate, it's not really easy to set up a new orchestra. And so in that sense, it's a novelty for us to kind of try and carve out our space in the current climate of musical orchestras and musicians in Britain.
Yes, I mean, it's quite odd in a way to think of a new orchestra because the ones that we have tend to be struggling and numbers indeed have been reduced. I used to be associated with an orchestra which unfortunately went under. You've got some private backing for this.
Yeah.
Why do you think the private backers have been willing to give you support? What is it that they see as your unique selling proposition?
Well, Chromatica Orchestra essentially is an early career orchestra. So we're formed of all sort of top musicians who've graduated in, say, the last sort of 5 to 10 years. Because everyone is of that generation, there is a sort of enthusiasm and dynamism that we bring to the stage I think is quite unique. The orchestra's mission, it's really focused on creating opportunities for young emerging musicians.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubry, covering for the big man now at COP29 as the Bajani president and the host, Ilham Aliyev, didn't hold back in his opening address, sharply criticising Western nations, accusing them of hypocrisy for buying his country's gas while lecturing the rest of the world on climate responsibility. Fair point. He then went on to describe fossil fuels as a gift of the gods. Now, such blunt political attacks and defence of fossil fuels are very, very rare in COP speeches, especially from the host nation. And as Sir Keir Starmer is the only major Western world leader in attendance, does this highlight the total absurdity of the net zero agenda in the UK and indeed the abject and utter pointlessness of these climate conventions? Well, let's get a view now of my panel. I'm still joined by the former Conservative MP Ranil Jayawardena and the former Labour advisor Matthew Laws, and once again, hoving interview, the delight of Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg. I come to you first, Matthew, for a bit of balance. Got to be said, Sir Keir Starmer appears now to be the lonely captain howling in the crow's nest. Nobody is listening. No one seems to care. The big leaders aren't there. China isn't there. India aren't there. The world's biggest polluters aren't there. Donald Trump is all about drill, baby, drill. Surely this is the last of these absurd conferences.
Well, no. The answer to that is no. There will be one next year. I mean, I think the travelling circus of these COP conferences has got out of hand, and that there is clearly discussions need to be had. But I'm not sure they need to be done on the World Summit stage. I'm not sure that Keir will want to get back on a plane if he's not exactly had a fun time, as it were, there. Look, climate change is real. Climate change is affecting people. I've actually done some work for COP29, which is about the small island states, which are literally on the front line of rising sea levels, which is a huge issue because sea levels are rising.
I read yesterday sea levels are going down again.
Well, that's not what most of the science says. But on the politics of this, I think that Keir made a point today, which is we cannot dictate to people their lifestyle. We can't sacrifice our economy for net zero. We can play a part in the transition that is coming because the fossil fuels.
We're making people poorer. We're forcing them to get rid of their petrol cars in 2025 or 2030.
We're not forcing them to get rid of them. We're forcing them to not buy the sale of new ones. This is the big difference.
Well, you've got to buy a new one. Let's be like Cuba and we keep these cars on the road forever.
Yeah, I mean, obviously over time that affects the replacement. Look, we need to have a just energy transition which involves being the leader in green technologies, which is what the Great British Energy, which is what the government's investment is all about. It shouldn't be about dictating at a micro level people's behaviour. And I think, I don't think the British... I mean, do you remember that the COP last year, there was or 2 years ago, there was the dispute about whether or not the King was going to go when I think he just, my timetable's confused. But, Liz Truss wasn't too keen on that, if I remember rightly. I think
they didn't go either. Rano, let's focus on the here and now. And it's this: Donald Trump has just been elected. Drill, baby, drill. He doesn't give a monkeys about these conferences. Is this the final signal that we're going to see America get booming, more prosperous, untethered from net zero? Will the British government, the British people get a whiff, get a glimpse of that and think, that's what we want. We don't want this net zero nightmare to be our future.
Well, I don't think looking after the environment needs to be mutually exclusive with, economic growth and, making sure people
tell the Chinese they're not even there.
Well,
they're signed up.
But I think it is important to say that there is a hypocrisy, there is a cover-up, as it were, with the fact that the Western world will buy oil and gas from Azerbaijan or from the United States or from Qatar, from Saudi Arabia, from all sorts of countries around the world, and yet the government here has stopped us using our own resources in the North Sea. We're importing at huge expense and indeed at the expense of more CO2 into the environment simply to say that we are not going to produce oil and gas here. It is bonkers. But also, I think there is a fact that is beginning to dawn on politicians, which is you've got to be common sense in the way you do these things. People aren't voting ever in an election to make themselves poorer, to make themselves colder, to make their lives less comfortable. And, it's no surprise.
Yeah, they did vote for the Labour Party, whose policies were all of the above.
Well, I think, we did make some mistakes, and people did quite understandably punish us.
You guys could have stopped them, but you were all in favour. I'm not sure about net zero target.
But, we do need to make sure that we are better next time and clearer.
The great tranche of the Conservative Party would basically have the same energy policy as the Labour Party. Admit it.
Well, look, what I will say is it's very clear that, Canada's not there, Russia's not there, India and China are not there. Big countries around the world are choosing not to participate. And in the case of Canada, it's no surprise, given that Trudeau knows he's got a very difficult election coming up, where people are beginning to realise that he is sort of a commander-in-chief of the wokerati, and it's not going to stand any longer.
OK, let's get Jacob Rees-Mogg in on this. Before we talk about what's on your menu tonight, called State of the Nation, is up next. What's your take on the COP29 farce?
Well, I think the President of Azerbaijan's absolutely spot on. Hydrocarbons are a gift of God. They have made us more prosperous. They've lengthened our lives. They've increased GDP per capita across the globe. It is a great miracle of our economic success that we have fossil fuels. Cheap energy is essential to everything. Our policy in government was dreadful. It was a terrible mistake. We bought into all this green nonsense. It was the fashion of the day, and it was a fashion of prosperity. Now we're not prosperous. People are giving it up. People won't vote for it. And Sir Keir Starmer, the Reverend Starmer, is going to have to give it up, or else he'll be given up on. Trump has got it right, is leading the way. And if the US and China, the two biggest economies in the world, don't care, then it's completely and utterly pointless the UK trying to reduce its emissions by 81% of 1990 levels by 2035. It's balmy, bonkers, batty.
OK, excellent stuff. And talking of which, what's on your show tonight?
Well, I'm going to be talking about His Grace the Archbishop of Canterbury, for whom I feel certain sympathy. I think we look back on people hearing information years ago with the hindsight of knowing the terrible things that happened. But when he was first warned that this man was not a very nice person, nobody had any idea of the scale of abuse that had gone on, not just in the Anglican Church, but in a variety of institutions, including my own church, the Catholic Church.
Do you think your sympathy might be a lonely wicket?
It may be. But I think the Archbishop is a genuinely holy man, and I feel therefore sorry for him that he's found himself in this position and has felt that he's had to go. And I think it's pretty disgraceful that fellow bishops have taken potshots off him. And if you've taken a potshot off at him, you must not become Archbishop of Canterbury. You can't be rewarded for ambition. OK,
Jacob Rees-Mogg, State of the Nation is next. Randall Matthew, thank you very much. I'll be back tomorrow, 3 till 6. Up next, State of the Nation, though. Here's your weather.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again and welcome along to the latest forecast from the Met